Rabbi, so welcome back to Yerushalmi Pesachim now. Mechila, again, I was a bit tired in the last year, but we're wide awake today. We are holding at Kaf Hey on base. There'll be a shir today and tomorrow, and then I've got a simcha and I'll be away for a few weeks. And the next year after that will be around the 30th of June. And hopefully we'll be around 3 weeks ahead and we'll be roughly where everyone else is on their 5.5 year cycle. So we're holding at Kaf Hey Ahmed base towards the top. Yeah. Now we spoke about Masechet Pesachim Daf, whether you could cheat things in certain cases, whether that's permitted. Rabbi Lezer allowed it, Bishur forbade it. The Gemara brings a brisa with another argument between Rabbi Lezer and Bishur on the same sort of question. So, you got an animal and its blood. The Torah says you can't slaughter both on the same day. Now, Shanafla Labo, they fall into a pit on Yom Tov. What do we do? Now, an animal not fitting for shechita is muksa. You can't bring it out of the bow. Now, there's two animals in this pit. Now, we can slaughter one. We can't slaughter both because one is the parent of the other one. So, Reb Lezer, look, you bring the top one up thinking you're going to shecht it. But then you should shecht it. But Hasheni, the second one, leave it where it is. You throw a bit of food down there for the time being, and that's it. But be sure, says, look, bring out the top one, with the intention to shecht, but you don't need to shecht it. And then, then you can bring out the second one. And even though if afterwards you decide I'm not slaughtering any of them, mutter that is permitted. He asked, we have a contradiction of Rabbi Lezer. Tamam, in Oizo is Benai. He argues on Rabbi Shua, who Amar also Harim. He says, right, you can't do any cheats. You can't bring both animals up on Yom Tov. He only allows you one animal. The other one has to stay there. But Hacha, now we had a case of Hafrashas Chala on Yom Tov of Pesach from a dough which was Tameh. And who Amar Shemutza Harim, he says, yeah, you can do a cheat to bake the whole dough. So Gemara says, Hacha, with a dough which is Tameh on Yom Tov, he allows you to bake the thing. Mishum Bali Roi Bali Matzah. You'll be over if you just leave it. If you leave the raw dough to become chametz, you'll be over, right? Taman, whereas there with over this no ma'izlach, what issur is there? And Rabbi Lezer allows harama, where without it you'll be over an issur. In the case of Hafrashas Chala, he allows it because otherwise you won't bake the dough, and whatever doesn't bake is going to become chametz. You'll be over bali raya, bali matzah. Whereas Oiser es benai, there's no chashash avera by leaving the animal in the pit, and therefore he does not allow you to bring both animals up. We have a contradiction in Rabbi Yeshua. Also it appears Tamam in Oisves Banahu Amar Mutalahari. He says bring out both animals. But with Hafrashas Chuma Yom Tov of a dough which is Tameh, who Amar, he argues on Rabbi Lezer. It says separate challah from the dough, bake the rest. He does not allow you to bake all the loaves before separating challah because asala arim. He says, no, you cannot cheat to allow you to bake all the dough. Rabbi answers, can, with oisves benai, moving the animal in Yom Tov is not also a mishum shvus. It's a rabbinical shvus, whereas we can, but hafrashas challah is chiyav chatas. You're baking, it's not really a chatas, because it's baking not for the sake of Yom Tov, right? Yom Tov is a lav, right? It's not chatas. So, but still, it's still an issur. Yeah, it doesn't really mean chiv chatas here. And Rabbi Yeshua allows harama only to allow you to do something which would be also issur rabbanon. So he allows harama with oisves benai muksa. Okay, fair enough. But he doesn't allow you Hafrashas Chala when you'll be baking on Yom Tov, not for the sake of Yom Tov. He gives another answer. Taman with oisves benai, he allows harama because there's a big monetary loss. So he allows you to bring the animal up. Hacha with Hafrashas Chala, what difference is that you bake the challah dough or you don't bake the challah dough? Ma'izlach, what loss is there? He allows you to stop a big monetary loss. Right? Oisves benai, the animal might die in the pit, even if he's got food, but something might happen to it. But just separating challah now and baking it, he doesn't worry about that. Rav Yitzchok, Rav Yoshe, they gave other answers. Chad Kaden. Yeah, one gave like the answer of Ravidi that we quoted, and one gave like the answer of Rizibun. Now, we brought three opinions with separating challah from a tameh dough on Yom Tov. So Rabbi Lezer said, don't separate challah from the dough, you'll be over issur chametz, bake the dough, and then separate one for challah. Rabbi Yeshua said, separate challah from the dough, even though it will become chametz. It's better it becomes chametz than baking the dough, which in the end will be challah, and you'll do nothing with. And Ben Beseira holds, you should separate challah from the dough, but put it in cold water straight away, so that it will not rise. And that way you won't be over Isser Chametz, you won't be baking challah tmei on Yom Tov, and the malacha is not going to be done, okay? So the Gemara brings about machlekes in the Mishnah, Dosh Rebrachia, Kadoid, Paskin, like Idashan, like Rebbe Seira. That take the dough, separate the challah, put it in cold water. Masnisa Amrake. Also, in the Mishnah, now after Gamliel the Chacham Rebbe Kiva, now this is about the coming and forth the Mishnah we're going to see soon. 3 women baking on Pesach in one oven. And there's various processes that are done in the baking of the challah, right? You've got the preparing, the kneading of it, then you've got preparing the dough sizes, and then you've got lighting the oven, then you've got baking in the oven. There's a whole process how they have to do it. And there, how you do it, and Rebbe Kiva finishes off, Tafach til tosh b'tzonim. He says, if some woman wants the dough, is about to swell, moisten it with cold water to stop it fermenting, stop it rising. And that klal of Rabbi Akiva fits into what Beseira says, cold water prevents the rising. So the Mishnah, the coming Mishnah, which brings Rabbi Akiva, supports Rabbi Rechia, who paskin like Ben Beseira. Mined Rabbanu Pligin. The words of the Chachamim argue on Rabbi Rechia. The Mishnah coming up seems to be of support to Ben Beseira. Now when Rebbe, when he put the Mishnahs together, and he mentioned a machlokes in one Mishnah, then he mentioned a Stam Mishnah, another Mishnah, like one of the opinions in the previous Mishnah, Halacha Kistam. Then the Halacha is like that Stam Mishnah. So here, so when Rebbe brings machlokes, and then when he brings one argument, and then he brings a second argument, then the Halacha is not like that second Mishnah. And Rabbi Kiva in the following Mishnah, he's the one who says put in cold water. Rabbi Gamliel and Chachamim argue. So the same argument that we have in our Mishnah, does cold water stop the fermenting? Yeah, that's also brought in the following Mishnah as a machlokes between Rabbi Kiva and the other Tanaim. So there's no raya how to paskin. So we've got an argument here, and we've got an argument there. So it doesn't mean that halacha is like one more than the other. Okay, halacha dalet. Now we come to these 3 women who are all baking their dough. So remember, what are the various processes? First of all, you have to knead the dough. Then you sort of shape the dough, shape the challah to make a sort of, it's called aricha, so preparing it, as it were. Then you light the oven, light the fire, and then you have the actual baking process. So there's 4 stages, right? So the question is, if 3 women are kneading a dough and making challah, at what stage does the second one start? When the third one starts? If you're worrying about the dough rising, and the chametz and so on, how close to the first one must the second one start for the third one to start? So they can knead the dough in one go, and even though they're kneading at the same time, when they finish their kneading at the same time, you don't have to worry that their dough will rise of the second woman or the third woman by their waiting until the dough will get into the oven. You don't have to, it's only a short period of time. The Chachamim said, don't do this. We are worried of chametz, but this is what you should do. 3 women are working on one dough, but they don't start at the same time. Each one starts at a time when the previous one has finished the kneading and begins the preparing, so that even when the first one is baking, all the women are still involved with their dough, as we shall see. Let's say the last woman is kneading a dough, and at that time, the second one, the one before, will be preparing the challahs, as it were, preparing them. And the first one at that stage might be baking the dough. So the doughs are not staying without being involved, without being worked on. Rabbi Kiva, he said, not all women are the same. Not all wood is the same. Not all ovens are the same. So you can't really give a klal on this. So don't allow it unless each woman will be involved with her dough without any stop all the way till the baking, because you won't have any waiting to do. This is the rule. The way to stop a dough about to swell is that you moisten your hands with cold water and you smear it on the dough, and that will stop it rising. Now, according to Rabbi Gamliel, all the 3 women are allowed to knead at the same time, and they'll finish their kneading. So the Gemara brings a brisa which explains how much time is there. Let's see. When is their dough not being worked on? Tiny we learned in the Brisa. The first woman, Rishona, she's waiting between her preparing and her baking. So between her preparing the dough and actually baking the dough is making the fire. That is the period of time that she's waiting. The Shnia, the dough of the second woman, she's waiting between her preparing and her baking until she gets to bake it. It will be Kedei Shnei Hasekin. It will be 2 fire lightings, her own one and the woman before her, and Vafir Achas and the baking of the woman before. You follow? Yeah, you got a nice little diagram down here in the bottom. So the second one will wait for the 2 fire lighting fires and 1 lot of baking. After the first one has made her fire and baked her challah, the second one will light her fire and bake her challah. So the second dough is waiting after it's preparing 2 fire lightings and 1 baking. And the shlishis, the dough of the third woman, is waiting between her preparing and her baking. She's waiting for Kidei Shlosha has taken 3 oven lights, Shtei Afiyos, and 2 baking. She's waiting for the first one to be baked and the second one to be baked. Okay? Now let's say the third one has 2 loaves. She's got another loaf, she'll have to wait for the second loaf a bit longer. She'll have to wait Kikar Rishon. If she baked the first loaf Achron last, for some reason she made 2 loaves, and the first loaf she waited for last. So she left the first loaves for last. So now, and she started baking it after the second loaf. Then it's going to wait a period of time. It's got 3 oven lights, Shlosha Afiyos, and 3 bakings. Because you've got the first baking of the first woman, the second baking of the second woman, and then you've got the baking of the second loaf, which she did before she's baking her first loaf. So that's the period of time we're going to have. Now we said in our Mishnah, according to the Chachamim, the 3 women are allowed to be involved in the dough, where each one begins kneading at a time where the one before her finishes her kneading and starts the preparing. So the time when the last one starts kneading, the woman before her starts preparing, and the first woman starts baking. So, Tari, we've learnt in a Brisa. What's the view of the Chachamim now? The Chachamim said, don't all start at once. You should start as separate intervals. So the Chachamim said, so when the last one finishes her kneading and begins her preparing, and at that time, the second woman will finish Kitufa, her preparing for the loaves. And the first woman will finish Heseka, her firing up the oven. So the times of the kneading and the preparing and the firing the oven are equal times. So when the first one begins to make the fire, and the second one starts preparing, and the third one's kneading at one time, they're all working together. Then the first one starts baking, the third one starts preparing, the second one's waiting till the first one finishes baking. When the first one finishes baking, then the second one starts lighting the fire and bakes. And the third one is waiting until the second one finishes to light the fire and bakes. So the dough of the first one, Rishona Shoya, is waiting between her preparing and her baking Kidei Sika, that's the time of lighting one fire. And the Shnia, the dough of the second one, waits between the preparing and the baking Kidei Sika, the fuel of the second one, the Afias Chaverta, and also the baking of the first woman, because the time when the first one is involved in the baking, the second one has to wait. But Shlishis, the dough of the third woman, is waiting between the preparing and the baking, Kedei Shnei Hasekan. That's 2 fire lights of the second woman and the third one, Vafir Achas, and 1 baking of the second woman. Because at the time when the second one is making a fire and baking, the third one is waiting. V'im Asas, now if the third one made 2 loaves, and she baked the Kikar Rishon Achron, the first loaf she made, she actually baked it last, then the first loaf of the third woman is without any acing, it's waiting, the time it takes for 2 fuels, 2 firing ups, and 2 bakings. Even when the baking of the second one of the third woman is waiting without being involved, apart from the waiting of the baking of the second woman. Rav Gamliel said they can all bake together, knead together. And bake in the oven, one after the other. But Chachamim said 3 people involved with the dough. Achaz lasha, when one is kneading, then achaz arachaz, then one starts preparing, but achaz over, then one starts baking. Tada Rav Oshia. Now, when the last one finishes preparing, achares, the first one can come back. Ba'ava lasha tachtem, can start kneading again a new dough. And they can follow this sort of cycle, right? So this is one, this one, this one, this one, this one. When that one gets to that stage, that one starts. And that way they will not have any chibut. Istanotani, someone to learn, bechitin, that if it's a dough of wheat, the shear is shlosha kabin, 3 kab. But more than that, you can't knead in one go. You can't stop it from becoming chametz. Of a sa'irin, when it's a dough of barley, abar kabin is 4 kab. Istanotani, some say, bechitin, with wheat is abar kabin, 4 kab. The sa'irin, barley is shlosha kabin, it is 3 kab. The one that says wheat is 3 kab, the sheyesh ben shamnunis, there's a bit of moisture and it mixes with the water, and therefore it becomes chametz. B'sa'irin, and the one that says barley abar kabin is 4 kab, the sheyesh ben shamnunis, there's no moisture. The one that says wheat is 4 kab, the reason is wheat do not machmitz quickly. De'enan chatian because they are hard. B'sa'irin with barley, shlosha kab is 3 kab. De'enan retishin, when they are soft, they become chametz much quicker.
Even with cold water?
Well, Rakiva said cold water stops things, but I don't know if everyone holds to that. It says here that Tanaim argue if wheat hurries up to become chametz or barley. It's mashma also in Rashi. Some say everyone agrees wheat is not mamayel hachmetz. There's a Tanu who holds that chitin maybe is quicker than barley.
I thought the whole point was you put it in cold water.
Well, I don't know. That's what Rakiva said now. Everyone seems to say this now. Mishnah, Si'ur, which is a dough which has started to ferment, but it's not been machmitz yet. If you should burn it. But even so, ha'achla, one who eats it is potter. It's potter from koros and lashes. Siduk, where it's more chametz now, you can see cracks. Even though, also, Yisrael should be burnt. But ha'achla, one who eats it is chayv koros. Ezel Si'ur, so Si'ur is the earlier stage, where you see small cracks, kikanech hagovim, like the locust wings, whatever. Siduk is where the cracks are wider. The cracks mix with one another. Dear Rabbi Yehuda, they said zebazeh, whether there's the cracks and they're mixed together, or you only got the smaller cracks. One who eats is chayv koros. Ezel siur. What is a dough which is called siur and there's no koros? Kol sifu panav, where the face is white, there's no cracks at all. Adam Shamsa Sarosa, like a person whose hairs are standing on end. Rav Hudav Shem Rav. Now this seal, this early stage, you can give it to your dog. Now the Chachamim said that this dough, which has got these small cracks like the locust, is seal, according to Yehuda, is correct. If you see, there's no crack above, there must be a lot of cracks underneath. Now this is Erev Pesach falling on Shabbos. You got to get rid of the chametz, whether it's chulin or truma. So Rameh says get rid of everything on the 13th. They said bismana. No, you can get rid of chametz. Like you can't burn it on Shabbos, but you can be mevatel it on Shabbos, like we do. Bismana, so you do it on the 14th, even though it's Shabbos. But as Rav Sadok, he said truma melifnei Shabbos, because there's not so many people eat it. You have to worry you won't find anyone eating it. To do that on the Friday, but chulin bismana, chulin on the right day. Now we brought separating challah from a tamei dough and yom tov shel Pesach. We don't separate the challah because then you won't be able to bake it and it'll become chimutz. You should leave the challah after you put the dough in the oven and leave it there till it burns. But Bishur held you can't do that. You're causing to burn challah tamei and yom tov. You should separate the challah from the dough and it becomes chametz. It doesn't matter. So we're going to bring that argument and connect it with the argument here between Rameh and the Chachamim. So I said Rameh and Kabbalazah. Rameh in our Mishnah, he says get rid of everything before Shabbos. He's worried it won't get eaten. You'll be over Bali Raya. Now burning truma is issur ruining truma. You're actually burning truma a day early. Right? You're burning truma, this might be tahor truma, on the 13th. And he's worried you might not eat it on the 14th, so he says burn it on the 13th. Right? And that's like Rabbi Lezer, who said you can burn the challah on Yom Tov, so you shouldn't be over Bali Raya. But Reuben and Rabbi Lezer, and actually the truth is the view of Rabbi is more than Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Lezer, he was worried you'll end up owning a definite Issur Bali Rabbi Matzeh. He allows you to cause an Issur, burning Kachim on Yom Tov, so you shouldn't come to Bali Raya. And if you don't burn it, it'll become Chametz, and you'll be over Bali Raya. Now, even though it might be Truma, and Bavli seems to say, well, Truma might belong to the Cohen, and therefore it's not really yours. So the Yerushalmi seems to be worrying about Bali Rabbi Matzeh, even on something which you've already separated as Truma, and it's not really yours at all. But anyway, that's another story. Rameh says, Shleyav L'Safik Bali Rabbi Matzeh. Rameh, we find, he allows you to destroy Truma even on the 13th, because you might not find someone who will eat the Truma on the 14th. You hear that? He's got a suffix, and he still allows you to burn it. So he goes further. And Asya the Rabbanon Rabbi Yeshua, the Chacham in our Mishnah, who remove everything on Shabbos. And even the Truma, hardly anyone eating, it might not get eaten. No, don't destroy it before Shabbos. And they go like Rabbi Yeshua, and they go further. Varuba, Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua, he said, he said, on Kod Yom Tov, don't burn country. Right? You can't allow burning country on Yom Tov. This is what I say. Because of Bali Raya. Rabbanon, that Machmeh v'Amrin, he said, I feel about Cholein Sovereign as a country. They said, even on the 13th, the weekday, even the Issur Shrev's Truma on the Tahir on a weekday, we don't Issur say, he doesn't allow it to save you from Issur Bali Raya. Now we said, according to Chachamim, you cannot remove Truma's Chametz on the Friday, because you can still eat it. We're going to bring an argument about Truma, which is Suffolk Tuma. Tani Arabi, there's no argument on Truma Tahir Sofa. Truma Tahir you can't burn before Shabbos, because you can eat it. But Truma Tameh, if it's Tameh Truma, of course you can burn it. Shmut to the Safa. Amanach, because where's the argument? Ala Tuluya, where it's a suffix, it might be Tameh, it might not. Shmei Shabbos, every Shabbos say, hey, Sofin, don't burn it. Basil Leibrin, Basil say Sofin, you can burn it. Amaru Beis Shammai Beisil. They said, Klub, Martin Maimrin, when do you say Tahira, Shalaiti Sof shouldn't be burnt? You know, people want to eat the Truma, we didn't find anyone. That's Tahira. Eloshani Ema, Shama Kain Echad Shabbos. But maybe, you know what, don't burn it, because you might find one Cohen within the Tchum, within 2,000 Amos, you never know. A Cohen might come into town, and he might eat it on Shabbos. He might eat this Truma. But if that's the case, to loyal to Sarif, even to Suffolk, you shouldn't burn it. Shama Omer, no, I say, well, look, maybe Eliyahu Navi will come along and tell you there's no problem with this Truma. He'll come and tell you it's permitted to the Kohanim. So there is a way the Truma might be eaten. So we shouldn't allow you to burn it before Shabbos. Beis Hill said back to them, it can't happen. We are sure. He's not going to come on Shabbos and Yom Tov, right? He doesn't want to bother people who are involved in their Suda Shabbos. He doesn't want to disturb your meal. He will not come on Shabbos. Now we're in the view of Rabbi Ezra Tzadok, who makes a chiluk between Truma and Chulin. He says Truma, remove it before Shabbos. Chulin, remove it on Shabbos. Now I bring another opinion, who makes a distinction. Rabbi Vav Rabbi Yechon. Now Rabbi Ezra Tzadok is holds like Gamliel. The commander of Gamliel, just like he said Mashne, he makes a difference. Between Chulin and Truma. He says Chulin can't be eaten out of Pesach till the 4th hour of the day, but Truma can be eaten till the 5th hour of the day. He gives you an extra hour for eating Truma. This is from Gamliel. So Keder of Nazar Tzadok, he also, Mashna, he makes a difference between Chulin and Truma. He says Chulin you don't have to remove before Shabbos, but Truma you have to remove before Shabbos, because there's less people eating it. And it could be they won't find anyone to eat it on Shabbos. What is the conclusion? Our Kamada Tema, just like we say Allah is on Gamliel, the Chvar says similarly, Allah is like Rabbi Ezra Tzadok. Same idea. Halacha Zayin. One who goes, this Shredes Pesach, to slaughter his come Pesach, and to do a bris on his son, and to eat at a wedding meal. Eresin is Kiddushin, right? Of course, in the time of the Talmud, they would separate the Kiddushin to the Nesuim, and therefore each one would make a Suda. Nowadays, we hold the two together. Beveis Chamim, in his father-in-law's house, it sounds like it's talking about the Chosen, but others say anyone who's invited to the engagement meal, the wedding meal, does not have to go back to destroy the chametz. And it sounds like you can even make this meal on Erev Yom Tov, although it says you shouldn't have a big meal on Erev Yom Tov. But maybe Erev Pesach is okay, because you'll have to start from your meal at the 4th hour, because we're chametz, and you'll be hungry by the time you get to night time. So, So you're going to do these mitzvahs, then you remember there's chametz in your house. So what do? If you can go back, you've got time to go back and get rid of your chametz, fine. But last mitzvah, and then you've got time still to do the Korban Pesach, so you go back. And if not, you can just nullify it in your heart. If you're going to save people from murderers and terrorists and so on, or from a flooding river, from a fire or a wall that's fallen down, you can just nullify the chametz in your heart. If you're going to stay at the border for Motzi Shabbos for your own personal reasons, not for a mitzvah, for your own personal, then you realize, I've got I'm at the border now, ready to move after Shabbos, I've got chametz in the house, you should go back, even if you won't have time to be Kali Yoshrisa. Now, Rabbi Isa, look at this line here. What do we say in the Mishnah? You're going to make a Korban Pesach. Or what? Or you're going to do a bris. Very great mitzvahs, right? Very, very powerful mitzvahs. What's the other if a person doesn't do a bris? Kares, right? Kares. And if you don't bring Korban Pesach? Any offers?
What's a
kares? Kares. Really severe. Rabbi said, what do we equate it with? One who's going to a wedding meal. How powerful is that? Going to a wedding meal. It's so powerful. It's equal to kares. This is my Shebrachas Torahs, right? What have you got here? Look at this. You've never heard this said at a wedding. I bet you've never heard someone say this. How great is it to go to a wedding meal? This needs to be a clip, right, on the status, yeah? How great it is to go to a wedding meal. Ma'gadol hu hashadai. But the Mishnah of going to a wedding meal, which is to increase peace between the two sides, shuhukash, is compared lishnei dvarim shechayavin alav kares. It's compared to two other mitzvahs where there's kares involved. Bris Milah and Korban Pesach. The fact that we have these three things equated together, we learn that Shalom is chashuv, like the slaughtering of the Korban Pesach and the Bris Milah of your son. Rabbi said, you will not see that in the Bavli, but you see it here. Okay. Then the Gemara says, okay, but out of the other two, which one is more important? So obviously maybe the wedding one is way beyond. But out of the next two, Bris Milah and Korban Pesach, then which one? Minas B'nai Shchinas B'nai Mikodim, which one comes first? Amar Pinchas. B'Madir Siv. The fact that it says, Hima like Kol Zacha, V'az Yukam La'asai. So you do every bris and then you do it. And Amar Minas B'nai Kedem Shchinas B'nai. Yeah, Bris Milah comes before Korban Pesach. Afilu Yachal Achzeh. Now you're going to save people. We say just get rid of it in your heart. Even if you're going to go and you're able to go back and get rid of your chametz. And you still got time. You don't do it. You just do it in your heart. Now, we said, what about you're going to stay at the border for your own personal reasons? Then we say, no, you go back. Now, even if you'll still be able to have time to go back, you still have to go back straight away. You might stay, you might delay. What do you mean you're staying there for your personal reasons? It says, it's a rabbi, you're going to go and see your teacher, someone who's greater in wisdom. Now, is that reshus? Is that personal reasons? Can. And Mishnah, we say going to see your teacher is like reshus. Shana Rebbe and Masechet Pesachim Daf. Rebbe says, you know what? Doing mitzvahs is more than learning. So going to your Rebbe is for learning. But doing mitzvahs and action is greater than learning. They agreed Talmud Kodem L'Maseh. They said that learning is greater than action. Because learning leads you to action. If you learn Torah, you'll be able to keep the Torah and the mitzvahs. And the Torah will improve the way you do the mitzvahs. It'll be more muhuda because you'll know what you're doing. And learning Torah, you'll keep every word of the Torah as a mitzvah in its own right. So you're keeping many more mitzvahs. Right? There's brought many places in the Gemara that Talmud Torah is greater than all the mitzvahs. And it says even if all the mitzvahs of the Torah are not equal to one word of the Torah. It also says in Bavli, Gadol Talmud Torah, Yosim Ansalas and the Foshas, Minim Esmidash, and Kibbutz Abayim. So Rebbe must agree that Talmud Torah is greater than other mitzvahs, but he holds still, if you got a Maisa mitzvah and Talmud Torah, you should do the Maisa, right? Even if you could get other people to do it. All right, let's carry on. The Talmud Kohen and the Maser. Okay. Rabbi Baal Shalach Rav Chanina Bray said to Rabbi Chanina, son, you should learn Torah with Rabbi Yochanan Tavaria After a while, Asan Ramrele, they told Bavo, Gamal Chesed, your son, you want him to learn, is involved in burying the dead. He's not learning. Shalach Ramrele said to his son, maybe ain't Kavai because there's no burials here. I said you to Zavaria, Shalach to Zavaria, they decided to Talmud Kohen Masa. Learning comes first. Rabbanah the Kishin, when they said Adar to take, but we say learning comes first. And you don't have to stop your learning. Someone else can do the mitzvah. If no one else can do it, and Master Kohen, then the action comes first, and you stop your learning to do the mitzvah. Okay? They do discuss, some have a girsa, the Gemara learns that we don't stop children learning Torah for whatever reason. Even for mitzvahs, we never stop children learning Torah, even for Binyan Beis Hamikdash. And why that might be, because the learning of the children is a speech without sin, it's much more powerful. Some say when the child needs the teacher, it's like the Tinoka Shabbat Rabban in this matter. Okay. Well, yeah, some say children is special. Okay. Talmud, we have a story. Reb Chia, Reb Yosi, Reb Imi. Anon Amesig, they went to stay, they were a bit late, Gabi Reb Elazar, to learn Torah, so they were late in coming. Amalai, he says, where were you? Amalai, Gamal Chesed, they were burying the dead. Amalai, Reb Elazar said, there was no one else. Amalai says, Magahava. It was a ger, there was no one else involved with it, and that's why we had to be involved with it. Okay, Halacha Ches. This guy, he remembers, he has Kochim Kalim, and his puzzle, he's gone out. If you've gone past a certain point, from where you can see the base Mikdash, Sofim come, you burn it there, we don't bother you to come back. If you've not gone past that point, you come back to Yerushalmi, the sofa, and you burn it in the area of the Harav, which is an area for burning Kochim Kalim. Masechet Pesachim from the wood of the Mizbeach. Now, cases where you have to go back to burn chometz or kochim, what is the sheer chometz or meat that you have to come back? How big is the amount that you have to come back? Remember, he says there, whether you remember that they've got chometz or whether you remember you haven't got kochim, you come back because zayis. So whether it's kochim or chometz, kazayis. He says no, it's double the size. But Chacham said meat, basar kodesh is kazayis, and chometz is kabeis. So chometz is a bigger size. Now we're talking about leaving the borders of Yerushalmi, and we're talking now about widening the borders of Yerushalmi in the future. So he says, in that day, it'll be where the horse goes will be holy. So we dash, and they will increase on the borders a part of the city, and welcome to the area the area that a horse can run does not make a shade. So it's an area the horse leaves Yerushalmi, where it will reach at the time when it doesn't make a shade, which is at midday. And that's when it doesn't make a shade. Right? Rav Shmuel Bar Yisrael, if let's say, now we said if you've got meat, if you not can't pass a certain point, you can burn it. You have to go back. If let's say you're within the Gvul Kodeshu, if we treat it as Yerushalmi, this area of Sofim, then he's Sofenim in Koma, then just burn it there. Why do you have to go back and burn it in Yerushalmi? He says, "Sheken afilu b'Yerushalayim tovin." Even in Yerushalayim, they used to other regal would burn kochim kalim lifnei abira, right near the base Mikdash, not in the rest of the town, so they can burn it ma'asim marachim from the wood of the mizbeach. Now, kochim, which is pasul, can be burnt in the azara, where they would eat it. Kochim, which is tamei, Rabbi Kiva holds if it's tamei in the azara, you burn it in the azara. If it's outside the azara, you burn it outside the azara. Now, what about kochim that have left the azara? And the Chacham said it's tamei. Where do we burn it? So you got kochim which has left the azara and it's pasul. So there's gezeira of tumah. What do you do? Give me tamei b'chutz. Is it like outside the azara and you burn it outside, or like burning tamei in the azara and you burn it inside? He said the problem is it left the azara. If it's tamei outside the azara, the tumah came from leaving the azara, so it's tamei b'chutz and it's burnt outside the azara. The meat is tahor dvar Torah. You gave it a rabbinical tumah, and you're saying, oh, you must burn it outside. You gave it a tumah. You want to treat it as if it's tamei outside the azara, and it's enough that we say that we treat it like tumah that is tamei on the inside. Okay, now we learned Machlis Tanaim. What is the sheer chometz or kochim where you have to go back to burn it? Reb Meir said kazayis. Reb Yehuda said Kebetza, and we have another guess in the argument. Some changes opinions round. The Rameh says Kebetza, and Rabbi Yehuda says Kazais. Rabbi Yaakov Barach Hashem Rabbi Yassi, he learned Kamasnisim, like our text. Rabbi Yehuda, Simona, the way of knowing it is Minahida Brachas, so the Brachas, how much is the bread that you have to eat to make the bracha and do zimun on it, Zamin, and Kazais. And Rabbi Yehuda, Aimar Kebetza. So the same thing here. Just like Rameh, Shir Kazais is choshev to make zimun and benching. So also, that shir is enough to go back to burn kachim and to go back for bil chametz. And just like Yehuda said, less than a kebetza is not significant for zimun. So according to him, you need a shir is not big enough, not important enough. So the same thing with destroying the chametz. Now, if you remember that you have a shir kazais or kebetza of kachim, you're going to go back to Yerushalmi to burn it there. What should a person do if he's got less than the shus, less than the shir? I'll tell you, if you've got less than the kazais, so we don't get you to go back. Now, the Chachamim said there's a difference between chametz and kodshim. Kodshim, kazais, you go back. Chametz, kebetza. What's the difference? Zeh, because chametz, yesh le bittul. You can do bittul, manotari, you can do bittul with your heart. The chiyuv to physically remove it is rabbinical. So they're lenient, you're going on a journey, you don't have to go back. Whereas there, when it comes to kodshim, ain't like bittul. There's no bittul at all. You're Chaim and Atara to burn it, and that's why the Chachamim obligated you to go back to Yerushalmi to burn it, even if you have just the shaker's eyes. Ad Kedum. Until now, we've learned about somebody who's got kodshim, Basa Kodesh, which is possible. But what happens if you remember you've got chametz? Minayin, how do we know we have the same din? That, we don't bother you to go back. Ara is we would. We've learned the one who leaves Yerushalmi under Amra, it tells me wherever din applies to kodshim, applies to chametz as well. Perik Revi Alach Aleph. Melkaim Shenogu. Malkim Shenogu Lasses Melachim Avi Pesach Malchaz, where they do work until Erev. Now, we don't do work generally Erev Pesach in the afternoon, right? Why is that? Because they brought the common Pesach then in the afternoon. Right? We do things preparing for Yom Tov, but the idea of work, etc., we try and avoid it Erev Pesach in the afternoon. Now, some places had a custom not to do it in the morning as well. So where they had a custom for the morning, where they had a custom to work, I said, the people can do work. That's where they wouldn't do work, and I said, they don't do work. If you go from a place where they do work, to the other one, we give you both stringencies, and you can't do work, whatever happens. Now, don't cause trouble by creating arguments and so on. And don't be different from what everyone else does. The place where they do work. See, it says, you will slaughter the Kom Pesach in the afternoon. That's the Kom Pesach. The person goes and he slaughters it himself. How do I know you can get a shliach, an agent? Talmud says, you will cook it, you will eat it. All you have is the mitzvah of eating. Shriti, you can get an agent. Why does it say, it sounds like the owner has to slaughter it. He's telling you, ain't a din. It's not a din. It's not fitting that you should do your work. And your carbon should be brought at that time. So don't start doing work. At the time when your carbon is brought, you should treat it as if you are slaughtering it, right? And not to give any malach at that time. However, they still forbade you to do work when the Kom Pesach is brought, which is Erev Pesach after Chatzos. Ka'adar Tani, like we've learned. Then, Ka'adar Tani, in the following Vaisa. 1 second, who is it? Yeah, any person who's got a chiyuv of bringing wood or bikurim, like someone says, I'm going to bring wood from the Mizbeach. Also, the separate of the Tanis, he's not allowed to do eulogies and fasting. Malasas malacha babiyem to do work on that day. It's his Yom Tov. So you can't do malacha on the day that you're bringing a korban. Now, we're not allowed, we said, you should not do work when you bring your korban, and you have to be standing next to the korban. Now, how are we going to have all this? I'm Rabbi Yoina. Ilain Tamidin. The korban Tamid come and essential Kol Yisrael, and they belong to all the Jewish people. In Yom Kol Yisrael, and everyone to go. Less k'sim, no. It says 3 times a year you have to go. You think everyone not doing any work, the Talmud, to all be there, everyone mustn't do any work. But it says, you gather your grain. And therefore, if they're not allowed to do work every day, well, who's going to gather the grain? Here's a dogger. Right? We're not saying the guy will gather the grain here. It's the kind of chachamim. Who's going to gather the grain? They instituted Esrei Mishmaris, 24 Mishmaris, the 24 groups. And called Mishmar, and on each one of the Kohenim, there was a Yisraelim group, that they would stay in the Mikdash for at the time of the Dovid. They would not do any work on that day. They were like shlichim of all the Jewish people. They were there at the time of the Mikdash, time of the Korban so at the time of the Korban, you had Shal Kohenim, Shal Levim, Shal Yisraelim. Tarim, we learned that. There were 24,000, which was the pillar that came from Yerushalmi, and 12,000 came from Yerichai. And after Yerichai, you could have got 24,000 from Yerichai. And they said, we'll give respect to Yerushalmi, we'll give you 12,000. Kohenim lavoi, don't Kohenim for lavoi, and for Bechas Kohenim, of course. And Levim leduchel, Levim were on the platform. By the time they brought the carbon to Israel, they wouldn't do their work. They'll stand on the avodas of carbon, tefillah, tanis, and they were the ones who were the agents to stand with the carbon tablet. He said, they would blow the trumpets with the karbonos, Levim with their singing, Israelim standing at the marmodos with klisheh and the instruments, sheh ma'akvin as a carbon. The music would also be ma'akvin the carbon. Rabbi Avi Shem Laza, Tam Shem Laza. The reason of Rabbi Shem Laza is based on the pasuk. All the people are mishtachvim and the shem mishram the trumpets, etc. Rabbi Shem Laza Darshan, v'chal hakahal mishtachavim. All the people are bowing. Elu Yisrael, v'Hashem Asherah, Elu Halavim. These are the Kohenim that will blow the trumpets with the karbonos. Everything until the Oila. What does that mean? Hakol ma'akvin es hakarbon. Everything is essential for bringing the carbon. Okay, Rabbi Sai, we will stop here. You need me to stop? Okay, maybe 10 past. No, 10 past. He learned from the following. I'll give the Levim that were given for Aaron and his children from Bnei Yisrael to do the Avodah Bnei Yisrael, Chapa Bnei Yisrael, and there will not be any punishments except Negef and plagues. The Ednas and Levim Nusirim La'aron of Adam Tach Bnei Yisrael. Ela Levim. Lavan is Avodah Bnei Yisrael Ba'amayim. These are Ela HaKohenim. Chapa Bnei Yisrael Ze Asher. That's the musical instruments. Loya Bnei Yisrael Negef. There will not be a plague. V'Gashes Bnei Yisrael Ela Kodesh. Ela Yisrael. These are Kaisel and Mamodas. Where do we see that Asher is called Kapara? Chitna avoid Rav Yanta b'Shem Rabbanaya Zolachapa b'Nei Yisrael Zeh Asher. That's a reference to the share of the Levim, the carbon. Menayin Shashem Ma'akiv. How do you know it's essential? Rabbi Yaakov Barach b'Shem Rabbanaya b'Shem Rabbanina Zolachapa b'Nei Yisrael Zeh Asher. Now, Arei Pesach, Arei Korban Shakali Strong. Now, the Korban Pesach, everyone needed to not do work on Arei Pesach even before Chatzos. They should have been forbidden to do work even before Chatzos. And yet the Mishnah told us that we put the Malacha before Chatzos is only minhag. Surely none of them should do any work in the morning. It's like a Korban Pesach is belonging to everyone. So they should have been forbidden from Malacha even before Chatzos. We say it's only minhag. Amravo, Shani is different. Shein Pesach Korban Korban Pesach was brought 6 hours and onwards. So not in the morning. Rebavoboy. If a person said, a person says, I take up to bring an oila 6 hours and onwards, so in the afternoon. Mutter, is he allowed to do work then earlier, like before Chatzos? Rabbi Yosef, Pesach shikriu b'shachris. Pesach in the morning ain't a Pesach. It's not kosher. So till midday, that's not the time of Akrava, so you can do work. But Oila you bring in the morning, Shikruah b'shachris Oila is a proper Oila. Even though you didn't keep your neder, you said you'll bring it after Chatzos. So although you said you're going to bring one after Chatzos, it could be you can't do any malacha even in the morning. Now Rabbi said, this is a very interesting Yerushalmi piece here. I remember it from years ago. You'll see, you'll love this. There are many things that are customs, but some people have minhag, which is Gehinnom turned round. Some people have minhag, which are funny minhagim, right? And Yerushalmi says some of these minhagim are funny. Listen to this. A woman says, Motzi Shabbos, I'm not doing work the whole Motzi Shabbos. Is that a valid minhag or is that not a valid minhag? Any offers? That's not a valid minhag. He says, no, that's no, ain't a minhag. She doesn't want to do work the whole Motzi Shabbos, it's not a minhag. Then she says, Ad Yifnei Sidra, you know what? I'll wait till they say Ba'ata Kaddish and Shul. Minhag, yeah, that's the right minhag. What about not to do work on Mondays and Thursdays? Any offers, Rabbi Isai? A woman says, I don't want to do work Monday and Thursday. Is that a valid minhag or not? Rabbi Isai at the end there, is that a valid minhag? Any offers? Huh? Monday and Thursday, women says, I don't want to do work. Is that a valid minhag or not? He says here, ain't a minhag. That's not a valid minhag. What about if they say, I'm not doing work at Yispedei Tanisa till the end of the Slichas on the fast day? Yeah, minhag, that's a valid minhag. What about, I'm not doing work, but Yom Zarufta, the whole Erev Shabbos and Erev Yom Tov. The whole Erev Shabbos, all day Friday, I'm not doing work. Ain't a minhag. That's not right. But if they do it, min mincha sala'el, from mincha onwards, minhag, that's a valid minhag. What about, I'm not doing work, Yom Diachav, Rosh Chodesh? Minhag, that's a valid minhag. Arav Zora, the women that don't do the weaving, min av da'alil, from Rosh Chodesh Av, many of these things apply to men as well, by the way. Min av da'alil, from Rosh Chodesh Av to Tisha B'Av, minhag is a valid minhag. Shubai Paska Evan Shasiyah, because that's when the base midrash was destroyed. Ma'atam, what's the source for this? Gashas is Yaresun. Rav Chidna said, Kol Advarim, anything of a chumrah which has got a root, is a minhag kasha, and you should not stop it. Ayin the shitin haba, the Migdal Sabaya. There was shitin wood, which the Yaakov Vinu took for the building of the Aron. And the people didn't want to use this wood for mundane purposes, because the Kedusha of the Aron had this wood taken from there. Asked them, Rav Chanina, they asked Rav Chanina, Chavran Rabbanan, Chavran B'chamim, Ma'ol Amebad B'ayin, Avodah, can we use this wood for other things? Can we have to never use it, because they never used to use it? Because they always used to be Yisur, don't change from the minhag of your fathers, and just keep it as it is and don't change things. Okay, Rabbi said, we will stop here today. We will carry on tomorrow. Okay?